Jim Carrey's story is not just about comedy. It is a journey of struggle, pain, dreams, and a man who decided that he would turn his wounds into laughter for the world. His life begins far away from Hollywood, inside a simple working-class Canadian family where survival was more important than dreams. Jim was a shy kid, but inside him lived a performer, an artist who constantly looked at the mirror and made faces, voices, and impressions. Even as a child, he believed he was meant to make people laugh, even when life gave him no reason to smile. His family struggled financially. There were days when money was so short that they did not know how the next month would pass. Jim's father, a talented musician, had to work as an accountant to support the family. But when Jim was still young, his father lost his job. Their life collapsed overnight. Bills piled up, and survival became a daily battle. The family reached a point where they had to live in a van parked in front of a factory. Every night they slept inside that van. Every morning Jim woke up, went to school, and after school he cleaned floors and toilets in the same factory to earn a little money. This was not a childhood of comfort, it was a crash course in reality. But even in this harsh life, Jim never let go of his imagination. He would escape into his world of characters, voices, and wild expressions. That was his way of surviving the difficulties around him. He once said that comedy was not something he learned, comedy was something he needed to stay alive. At age 15, Jim decided to try his talent on a real stage. His father drove him to a comedy club and pushed him to perform. Jim went on stage full of excitement, but the audience did not laugh. They just stared at him. His jokes fell flat, and the young boy walked off the stage heartbroken. That failure cut deep. For months he refused to return. But his father, despite having lost so much himself, believed in Jim's gift. He told Jim that if he never tried again, he would never know what he was truly meant to be. Those words changed everything. Jim returned to the stage, not with fear, but with explosive energy. This time, people laughed. They didn't just laugh, they roared. His ability to twist his face, stretch his body, and shift into different characters made him unforgettable. Soon he became one of the most unique comedy performers in the local scene. He was wild, unpredictable, and completely original. By 19, Jim knew he had to leave Canada and go to Hollywood. The journey was terrifying. Hollywood was full of dreamers, and thousands failed before one succeeded. Jim struggled there, too. He lived cheaply, performed wherever he could, and auditioned endlessly. Many casting directors rejected him. They said he was too much, too crazy, too weird. But Jim understood one thing. The world remembers the ones who dare to be different. He didn't stop. His first major break came when he was cast on the sketch comedy show In Living Color. This show allowed him to unleash his full, wild talents. Every week, millions watched him transform into new characters. Hollywood finally noticed the unstoppable force he was. Then came the turning point that changed everything, the movie Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. Before its release, almost everyone predicted the movie would fail. The studio didn't believe in Jim's style. They thought he was too exaggerated, too silly. But Jim stayed true to himself. He refused to act normal. He refused to tone down his comedy. And when the movie came out, the world exploded with laughter. Jim Carrey was instantly launched into superstardom. His lines, his movements, his facial expressions became iconic. People copied him everywhere. And then, as if proving success was no accident, he delivered hit after hit. The Mask, Dumb and Dumber, Liar Liar, and Bruce Almighty all turned him into one of the biggest box office stars of the 1990s and 2000s. But Jim Carrey was more than just a funny man. He had depth, emotion, pain, and an ability to show the world something real. This became clear when he acted in The Truman Show, a movie that showed his dramatic talent. Audiences were stunned. Critics realized that behind the rubber face and wild comedy lived a powerful actor who could make people feel, think, and reflect. Jim had broken the boundaries of what a comedian could be. Behind all the laughter, however, Jim carried his own battles. Fame brought pressure. The world expected him to be funny every second, even when he wasn't okay inside. He often said that making others laugh was easy, but finding his own happiness was much harder. The more famous he became, the more he felt disconnected from himself. But at this point in his life, he was still climbing, still shining, still the unstoppable force who had taken over Hollywood with nothing but raw talent, passion, and an unbreakable will. This is where the first part of his story ends, not in peace, but in motion, because Jim Carrey's journey was far from over. His real transformation was still ahead of him, waiting beyond fame, beyond money, and beyond laughter.
As Jim Carrey's fame grew, so did the pressure on his shoulders. He was no longer just a comedian. He had become a global icon, someone the world expected to stay funny all the time. But behind that huge, bright smile lived a man who had already seen struggle, poverty, and emotional storms long before the cameras ever pointed toward him. Fame amplified everything, every strength, every weakness, every emotion he carried. Jim had always used comedy as a shield, a mask that helped him hide his real pain. The louder the world laughed, the quieter his inner voice became. Success brought money, awards, and worldwide recognition, but it didn't bring peace. He realized that the world loved the characters he created, but very few people understood the man behind those characters. He was grateful for his success, yet something inside him kept asking, "Who am I when the lights go off?" During this time, Jim began taking on more complex roles that mirrored the questions he battled inside. One of those roles was in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, a movie about love, memory, and heartbreak. Many fans saw it as one of the most emotional performances of his career, but for Jim, it was almost like therapy. The character's pain felt close to home. He was living parts of that pain in real life. Relationships came and went, each leaving marks that shaped him into someone deeper, someone more thoughtful than what the public expected from a comedian. As time went on, Jim felt himself drifting away from the Hollywood identity people built around him. He started exploring art, painting, and writing. The more he explored, the more he realized how much of his life had been spent trying to win approval, first from audiences, then from critics, then from everyone except himself. He had given the world laughter, but he had forgotten to give himself love. One of the biggest changes in his life came after the loss of people close to him. These tragedies shook him deeply and forced him to question everything he thought he wanted. He spoke openly about depression, describing it not as sadness, but as a body saying it doesn't want to be the character you are trying to play. Jim began to understand that he had spent years performing, not just on screen, but off screen too. The world saw the faces he made, the jokes he cracked, the energy he radiated. Few saw the exhaustion behind the scenes. This emotional journey led Jim towards spirituality and self-discovery. He started talking about the ego, identity, and how human beings often become prisoners of the roles society forces them to play. Jim began saying things that surprised people. Instead of promoting movies, he talked about the illusion of fame. Instead of celebrating awards, he questioned the meaning of success. Some people misunderstood him. Some thought he had changed too much. But in reality, Jim was simply becoming the truest version of himself, a man who finally allowed his heart to speak louder than his comedy. When he returned to acting after a long break, he chose roles that carried meaning. He wanted to play characters that showed vulnerability, humanity, and truth. He wasn't interested in proving anything anymore. He knew he had nothing left to chase. He had already become everything he once dreamed of. Now he wanted only one thing: peace. Jim often said that his father could have been a great comedian, but never got the chance, and that became Jim's biggest lesson. He learned that you can fail at what you don't want, so you might as well take the risk and do what you love. That message became a guide not only for him, but for millions of people who followed his journey. His story was no longer about how he made the world laugh. It was about how he inspired the world to dream boldly. In interviews, he began to speak about the power of imagination. He once wrote himself a $10 million check long before he was famous and kept it in his wallet as a reminder of what he believed he could achieve.
Years later, when he finally earned that amount, it felt less like a miracle and more like a confirmation of the faith he had in himself. Jim's life proved that belief is a force stronger than circumstances, stronger than poverty, stronger than fear. As he grew older, Jim stepped away from the chase for fame. He spent more time painting, alone in his studio, pouring years of emotions onto canvases. His artwork was bold, colorful, and full of raw honesty, qualities that had always defined him. Through painting, Jim expressed the parts of himself he never showed on stage. The world discovered that inside the comedian lived a powerful visual artist who had just been waiting for silence to create. Today, Jim Carrey stands as a symbol of courage. The courage to dream when life is hard, the courage to rise after falling, and the courage to find yourself even after the whole world thinks it already knows who you are. He no longer measures success by box office numbers or critical reviews. For him, success is being able to wake up without pretending to be someone else. It is being free from the expectations of the world. Jim's life reminds us that laughter is healing, but even the people who make us laugh need healing themselves. It reminds us that pain can shape greatness, that hardship can shape strength, and that a person can shine the brightest after walking through the darkest places. Jim Carrey did not just entertain the world, he taught it something meaningful, that your true self is far more important than any character you ever play. His journey is living proof that a child who once lived in a van, a boy who once cleaned factory floors, a young man who once failed on stage can rise high enough to touch the hearts of millions. His story is not only about comedy, it is about transformation, resilience, and the courage to live authentically. And even after all these years, Jim Carrey continues to inspire the world, not through jokes or movies, but through the truth of who he has become.